Welcome to the Lean Blog Podcast. Visit our website at www.leanblog.org. Now, here's your host, Mark Graban.
Hi, this is Mark Graban. Welcome to episode 350 of the podcast. It is November 4th, 2019. We're returning after a little bit of a break. And returning to the podcast today is my guest, Tim Turner. He was a guest in episode 90. Talking about the book that he wrote with a number of his colleagues from Toyota, a book called One Team on All Levels. And we've reconnected and we're talking today. Tim left Toyota after 22 years. So we're going to talk about some of the things he was involved in the last years of his career. And we're also going to talk about his experience of going and working at another non-Toyota company. And we're also going to talk about his work as a consultant. So it's an interesting evolution to bring these lessons from Toyota out into other organizations. So if you'd like to learn more about Tim and his book, you can go to the blog post for this episode at leanblog.org/350. Well, again, we are joined today by a returning guest. It's been a little while. Tim Turner is back with us. He was a guest in episode 90, way back in 2010. So if you want to find that episode, you can go to leanblog.org/90. But with that, Tim, let me welcome you back to the podcast. How are you?
Doing great. And thank you for the opportunity.
So, I encourage people to go and listen to that episode. But if you can help us maybe recap a little bit, we talked about a book that you collaborated with some others on called One Team on All Levels. So I was wondering if you could give a little bit of a synopsis of your career at Toyota, and then we're going to talk about some details I think that occurred after 2010, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I worked at Toyota for a little over 22 years, and I worked in that area. I went as high as team leader. And, but I worked in special projects. So, I built 1.1 million cars, actually building those cars. But then from there, I went into the safety department and worked, with the safety department for a little over 6 years. And then I actually, got to help launch the Lexus plant in Georgetown, which it's the only one in the United States. So that was a huge opportunity. But I've worked all over the assembly plants, the chassis section, final section, and trim section.
And were you there in Kentucky the whole time, or did you help with the startup of any other plants?
I was in Kentucky the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, can we delve into some of that a little bit? If you can sort of summarize for people. I think for one, what's the role of a team leader? And then maybe we can talk about safety a little bit. So first to the team leader question, like what are the day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute responsibilities of a team leader?
Okay. So I basically had 5 to 7 team members that worked with me. And I like to say I worked for them, but in the chain of command, they worked with me, and basically I would go out and I would answer the andons. So if there was an issue that they found, I would help solve that problem, and that's basically the core of the day-to-day. But then past that, it was communication, team building, problem solving, helping with quality circles to help them solve bigger problems. And so basically for me, that was my goal going in every day, is how can I serve my team members to help them be better, more effective at adding value to the company. And
and that there's elements of servant leadership in that, and it really flips the traditional supervisor role on its head. Like for comparison, when I was at General Motors, when I started in 1995, they had changed the job title I think it used to be foreman, which is a dated term in a number of ways. But they were calling them team coordinators. And one thing that was interesting to me being new is that they weren't really coordinating teams. It was just a different title and the same behavior. So I mean, the important thing is being helpful and being a leader, being a helper instead of being a boss, if you will, right?
Right. Correct. Yes. And one example that I have that I like to share whenever I speak on team leader roles were, during the economic downturn, we were tightening up on overtime for everyone, but that didn't mean we wanted the problem solving and the Kaizen mentality to stop. So team members would come to me with suggestions on how to make a process better. And one example is the cable that ties together to open up the fuel lid and the trunk with the little lever by the driver's seat. The way we had those cables routed and organized on our flow rack, they were getting tangled together, and it was making it difficult for the team members. So while the line was running, I was able to build a longer area to where we could stretch those out, and it eliminated those parts getting tangled up. And I did that while the line was running. So the team members still got their Kaizen done. They still got the credit for the Kaizen, but we were able to do that with the line running, and it didn't affect overtime or cost. So a lot of team leaders really dive into that side of things, and because we don't want to lose that Kaizen mentality. And if your workers come to you with ideas and then they never see those ideas come to fruition, they're going to quit coming to you with ideas. So it's really important to keep driving that home that, hey, if you come up with a great idea, we're going to do and it truly is a value added suggestion. We're going to do everything we can to support you and get that done.
Mm-hmm. And before that downturn, or maybe after the downturn, was it easier to get overtime approved to work on Kaizen or problem solving?
Yes. They Toyota, I believe they give an hour a week overtime, approved overtime, an hour a week for the team members to whether it's join quality circles or solve problems. And so typically that's budgeted in an hour a week.
Because when this is a few years ago, this is probably like 2013 or 2014, when I lived in San Antonio, I had the opportunity to take some healthcare leaders and nurses and doctors as a group to go visit the Toyota plant there locally. And at the end of the tour, and the tour was led by a team member, and he was on temporary assignment. And somebody from healthcare asked, well, you talked about Kaizen, but people sure looked busy building trucks. When do you find time for improvement? And I remember, so clearly she said, well, if we have an idea and there's not time to work on it during the day, we talk to the team leader and they'll allow us to work overtime to do it. And jaws dropped, because like in healthcare, it's really common to get in the cost cutting mode and to say, well, overtime is a cost. Overtime is bad. You can't work overtime. But there can be good reasons to work overtime and to make that investment, right?
Exactly. And it's as simple as creating a simple return on investment form, right? And to show what that return on that investment of that hours overtime would be. And, and in most cases, they're going to see a return on investment within, less than a month. So that's kind of a no-brainer for a company to say, hey, if I can get a return on investment in less than a month, why would I not do this?
Yeah, because it might be a Kaizen that saves a couple of minutes a day, and you could do the math and figure out how quickly that hour of investment pays itself back, right? But then there's also, and I've heard Toyota people talk about, maybe you can elaborate on this, the primary objective of developing people through Kaizen and problem solving. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes. Really that's invaluable. And Toyota is so big on developing their workforce that they see the they see the long-term goals. Toyota doesn't think in terms of what's our plan for this month. They're already thinking 1 year in advance, 5 years in advance, even 20 years in advance. So they're looking at the long-term return on investment of developing a team member. Mm-hmm. And, the Toyota calls it Hoshin planning. Most everyone's familiar with that term. And, Toyota does a 1 year Hoshin, a 5 year Hoshin, and then they have a vision for 20 years from now. And the whole company, everyone focuses on that Hoshin to drive the business wherever we want it to go in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one other thing, maybe kind of delve into a little bit more. When you said you were talking about serving people, the team members, you talked about helping people solve a problem when there's an and-on pull. I think in a lot of settings, and I see this in healthcare, traditional leadership is defined as, well, if someone reports a problem, I'm going to solve it for them.
Right.
Can you talk about like striking that balance of when do you talk about how do you involve people and do it? When do you do it together? When do you maybe delegate something? When do you take ownership as a team leader? When do you try to escalate a problem?
And so I was always really big. My rule was if you come to me with a problem, you have to come with me also with a solution. And that doesn't mean that that's the solution we're going to do to solve your problem, but I don't just want to hear everybody's complaints, right? So, but that would start the conversation on, hey, this is truly a problem. And it would turn into more of a coaching session and a brainstorming session on, let's look at all the options we have to solve this problem, and then we would chart that out through the TBP, the Toyota Business Plan tools, and the 8D. And so every problem ultimately became a simplified 8D. And that's how I would train my team members. So it would get them thinking outside of the box and not just have to spend so much money to solve this problem. Because like the case I was sharing with you about that cable, what we did is I took a 4-inch piece of PVC, cut it in half, screwed it to the flow rack, and we were able to stretch out that whole cable. So it was a $5 Kaizen rather than, building something that costed hundreds of dollars. We were able to solve it for a $5 piece of PVC piping, right?
Yeah.
And, so it's getting those team members to think outside of the box, and it really turned into a constant coaching session. Mm-hmm. And I was personally, and most team leaders are this way, and Toyota teaches it, the ultimate goal is to develop that team member into a problem solver themselves. And it's kind of like, the saying, give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day, teach him to fish. He'll eat for a lifetime. And it's along those same kind of lines. We really focus on developing them into coming up with solutions to solve their problems. And that's huge. I know for me now with my business, that's really my big focus is teaching cross-functional teams so how to solve a problem together. And most organizations, they have people that have the answers, right? They just need somebody to help coach the experts through the problem. And so that's kind of what we do.
Yeah, I agree with you. People have the answers. People should be involved. I think sometimes it can be helpful to provide a little bit of coaching around, problem-solving thought processes. And, there are so many different ways of framing that. At the front line, when you talk about that cable or other situations, were there a lot of formal A3s or were there other mechanisms for tracking what was being done or for guiding problem solving?
Yeah. So on the front line, right on the floor, it was a really simple, a simplified quality circle A3 form, and we didn't break down the details on paper. So the team members would come to us with the problem, potential solutions, and then at that point, depending upon the complexity of the problem, would depend on whether we turned it into an A3 or it was more of a simple Kaizen. And it really depended upon the complexity of the problem. So the team members would start out with 8.5 by 11 one sheet of paper that they would fill out. And then from that point, we would determine whether we can get all the needed information on that one sheet of paper, or do we need to make it into an A3 and truly break it down deeper.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm sure there's somebody listening to this right now who is talking to their car stereo or their iPhone as they're listening, and they're saying, "Ask them about kata." Come on, Mark, ask them about kata. So, I'm curious your thoughts on the Toyota kata mindset or methodology, and if you've read about that, or if that resonates with you in terms of the improvement approaches that were being used on the floor.
Yes, it's it really does. The development of the team members ultimately drives the changes. And the Toyota Kata, it's a great example as far as it's a mindset, right? It's a cultural shift for companies to get team members to think in those kind of terms. And it's it's a great example of a true cultural shift and a mindset change.
Yeah. So, before we jump into other topics, there's one other thing you mentioned in terms of different roles, and that was, being on special projects and being in a safety department. And, one thing that I've heard very consistently from Toyota people over the years in the U.S. and in Japan is the idea that, safety is a precondition. And, and I think, that word is used specifically. It's not just a priority, it's a necessary, it has to be their precondition for doing anything else. So I was wondering if you could talk, about, your experience, in terms of what's that mindset and culture around safety, and what types of things did you do working on safety special projects?
Okay. Yeah. You're right. It is. And actually safety, every standardized work form that I know of at Toyota that I've ever seen in my 22 or 23 years there was, had safety key points on it. It was literally built into the processes. And, so it's vital, but then, to keep the team members thinking about safety all the time. And a few examples that I did is team members would come to me with an idea. We actually had a problem with the door trim, the push force to install the door trim to the door. And the way the line was designed, the door carrier acted as if it was on a pendulum. So the door carriers are hanging above, and the team members would go to push that on. Well, when they would push that door trim on, the push force was pretty excessive because the door dolly had to go back an inch or two to create a hard stop before they could actually do their work. So I worked with a quality circle on that line. We designed a dolly that the team member would push a button, it would raise an arm up and create an instant hard stop on that door carrier. And then at that point, they could push that door trim on. So it went from being 27 kgs of push force down to 4 kgs of push force, which got us into our standard at the time. And we actually received a patent for that process. So it was, a pretty cool thing. This team of 5 or 6 people that were team leaders and team members on the floor designed this piece of equipment that helped multiple team members, and then Toyota got it patented for us. So that was, that's a huge thing for motivation whenever your company will actually pay for you to have a patent. And, of course, Toyota owns it. They implemented our Kaizen in other factories around the world, but my name will forever be on a U.S. patent. And that's such a big deal for me.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And then another one we did is the parent-child dollies that delivered our parts. Some of those parent-child dollies were really, really heavy because they had to be sturdy to withstand the constant shipping back and forth to the suppliers. So we on our parent dollies, we designed we put a button in just a simple air tank that you could buy at Lowe's or Home Depot, and they push a button, the cylinder would kick that door dolly out enough to get the wheels turning the direction that the team members needed to where they could pull it right into the line. So that was a $100 Kaizen that greatly reduced back injuries. So, it's simple things like that to building lifts. It could be, and safety was at the forefront, and everybody was highlighting those problems and saying, we've got to fix this because my back's hurting. I'm doing this 500 times a day. Right. And so we would get creative in how we solve those problems.
Yeah. And, I'm sure, there's, because the factory is always changing, and we'll talk about some of those changes in a minute. I mean, there's always something to work on, even with safety being such an important precondition. Things change, there's new opportunities for improvement that get introduced into the work, right?
Absolutely, yes. And our Lexus startup, I know we'll talk about that shortly, but that created a whole new list of opportunities to be innovative, and so yes, it's always changing.
Yeah. And before we talk about that, just one other thought. I'm just kind of reminded, and I saw somebody post reference to it earlier. Sometimes it's attributed to Taiichi Ono, sometimes it's attributed to Shigeo Shingo, or they both said it, or they both wrote it, talking about priorities for improvement: easier, better, faster, cheaper. And I remember once somebody asked, like, well, why doesn't he say safer, easier, better, faster, cheaper? And I thought, well, I hate to say safety. It's maybe problematic to say safety is assumed. But if safety really is a precondition, like the safety arch that you walk through, even coming in as a tour visitor, there's this expression that, that this is the safety is the doorway to all other work. Like, I wonder if it's the type of thing that Ono and Shingo didn't think needed saying. I don't know.
I believe so. And I also think that could be culturally as well for the Japanese, as far as taking care of their workers, and their workers tend to, that they tend to look out for each other too, which is kind of unique versus Americans, right? Is those workers together will say, hey, we got 5 processes, Jimmy-san or whatever, is hurting, and so we're gonna work together, and we're gonna keep him off that job, and that happens in Japan all the time. To give that team member a break, to let their hands rest on that more difficult job, and so that's a cultural thing as well, I believe.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of those changes, and you were deeply involved in this. If you could tell us about what it was like being involved in starting up Lexus production there in Kentucky.
It was honestly one of the most rewarding. Well, it was, as far as my career goes, the most rewarding thing that I ever had a chance to be a part of. Toyota, whenever we set up that Lexus plant, they had people apply to work for the Lexus plant, and then you had to be approved to work in there, and it was very stringent. They were looking for just the right people, and so when I applied, literally the applications opened up at midnight one day, and I actually stayed awake and applied. I was probably the first person to apply, but I applied for it, and luckily I got the chance to work in the quality gate teams. So I got to be a part of really the whole factory setup. And I started when it was an empty shell, and most of the team members did actually, but some key team leaders started about a month before the team members did. And we would go in, and they had actually went out and bought 27 Lexus ES350s from a local dealership. And we took those cars apart and rebuilt them, and took them apart and rebuilt them until till we couldn't use them anymore, basically. And we did that over a whole year. And the team members, team members basically had a year before we ever ran a car on the production line of training on those cars. And so it was very, very intense training, but TMMK realized, and Will James was the president at the time, and he recognized that, hey, we need to put our best foot forward for this. And so we had a whole year to prepare. And so there it was a 4-minute tack time. So most of the team members were used to, they're moving to the next car every 50 seconds. So now all of a sudden we're doing, 4 times the work that they normally do, but they have 4-minute tack time to do it in. And so the standardized workbooks would be 60 to 100 pages thick. And the team members had to memorize verbatim those workbooks. And they had to memorize those verbatim 25% at a time. And then they had to present that to the assistant manager. The assistant manager level and the group leader level would come out and have the book in their hands, and the team member would recite verbatim what that book said and walk them through the process. And we set up that whole plant like that, every team member learning. At the beginning, it was 2 processes, and we set up that whole plant like that over a year, which is why we won JD Power Platinum Award our first year after launching. And it's because of the level of detail that went into training these team members and getting them ready. And, I know for my team in particular, we had the quality gates. So I wanted my team members to be so knowledgeable of their line and the area they were responsible for that I personally sat down and typed out every major step and every quality key point that went to that element of the car. Mm-hmm. And then those team members, and I did that over 90 processes. And then my team members had to sit down and handwrite their 30 processes they were responsible for from a quality gate standpoint. They had to handwrite it, and that way I knew that they understood every quality aspect of that car. And the only person on their line that would know it better was the group leader. And because the team leaders were focused on their 4 processes, right? But my team had to know the whole aspect of final line. And so that's how in depth we got though with the training.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge investment to pay. It's an understatement to say it's a huge investment to pay people for a year as part of that startup.
Right, and it was about 900 team members, and it was we were not adding value to the bottom line, expenses of the company at the time, or the bottom line profits. But they were forward thinking in the fact that when we were successful, when we won JD Power, that was only going to increase the customers' respect for the company and that product. So, it's one of those perfect examples of team member development and the long-term vision and goal for what they wanted to succeed at. Yeah.
Wow. And when we talk about this process of taking apart and putting together cars, I imagine they were trying to help team members and everybody understand the totality of the product, of not just being brought in and trained on 1 or 2 60-second cycle jobs, right?
Correct. Yes, they wanted to understand it. And another aspect of my job was I was the sensory skills GPC trainer, which is the Global Production Center. And so I would teach team members to down to the minute details of a 1 millimeter gap. And if they couldn't pass my testing, then they didn't get to stay in Lexus.
Yeah.
So it was in-depth, a day-long training, just teaching team members. Like one example that I love to share with is making connections. So our functional skills training would teach people how to make connections in a timely manner. but the sensory skills, which is used at Lexus, and now it's actually used in the Toyota side as well. We yoke it in that to the other plants, but they would make a connection, and I would purposely bend pins, and we would adjust we had a little push force, a cylinder in each connection. And the team members would push a connection, and then they would have to determine whether that was a defect or not. Could they push it in? Did it have a little bit too much push force needed? So most likely there was a bent pin in there, and then those team members would have to tell me, okay, number 1 and 4 were bad. And so we were getting to the details of how does it feel when you make that connection, and is it right or is it wrong? And so yeah, that was another level of training that we did at Lexus.
Yeah. So let's maybe kind of change directions a little bit again. If can you talk about then what it was like leaving Toyota and starting to work with other organizations that were trying to improve?
Yeah, it is. It's a very interesting challenge to go to other companies, and I left Toyota and went to work for a Fortune 500 company for about 2 years, and helping that company take in some Toyota way principles to make them better, right? And but then one of the big challenges is just that whole mindset, that Toyota Kata mindset that you were speaking of, is getting them to understand the longer term goals of what we're trying to achieve. And so it's definitely a challenge, but it is so much fun to do it especially whenever they want to that change. So I've since left the company that I was working for and started my own consulting business and focusing on these companies and helping them, whether it's launching a new factory and doing it right the first time, or going back in and helping them solve their problems and get to that level. But it's not a fast process. It takes time to do that.
And when you say it's not a fast process, was that company you were working with patient about that, or sometimes organizations are very impatient about, we want to become world class right now. You have 90 days to go. Yeah.
There's they were excited, and I don't think they ever expected it to be an overnight thing. So, but there are a lot of companies out there that does want it to happen instantly. And that's just not how it works. So, especially when you're changing a whole mindset and a whole culture and getting them to see the bigger picture of what you're trying to accomplish. So you get those little wins that you can, and then that gets buy-in from other people to say, hey, this is some pretty good stuff. And, you get the little wins, and then you get some big wins along the way. And the whole time you do, you're changing that mindset about the whole process of lean. And, lean's one of those words that is used probably way too loosely. And I personally don't think that lean is just, let's go in and cut jobs. That's
right.
And it gets, that's the stigma, that's the stereotype. Right. But for me, I heard an acronym one time, or an example is, it's let everyone assist now.
Mm-hmm.
And that really stuck with me, as far as, that's the mindset that companies has to have, that it can't just be a decision from the top to say, we're going to go lean, right? It's got to be a buy-in from everybody. And to do that, you have to put in some soft skills, things in there, like the servant leadership. Toyota never really spoke about servant leadership, but everything that they do in their processes leads to a servant leadership mindset.
Yeah.
And so that's really, and that's really key to it. It's not about going in and cutting jobs. It's about going in and finding out what's the true value, what isn't. Can we shift some manpower around so everybody is adding value, right? And what kind of automation can we do to eliminate that non-value added work, whether it's in healthcare with AGVs, setting up dollies that can deliver, materials to each section of the hospitals, or whether it's in a factory setting.
Yeah. Yeah. And so maybe let's talk a little bit about the word lean. You use that acronym. It's a positive one, let everyone assist now. The one when you talk about companies, and this sadly is the case in healthcare, there's a tradition of cost cutting and there's a sad tradition of layoffs. And so people hear lean, and the one acronym, I'm sure you've heard it, is less employees are needed.
Right.
And that there are negative connotations to the word lean. I wish, going back in time, it had been a more positive sounding word instead of lean production, lean manufacturing. Because in a way, like I think people sometimes prejudge whether it's an executive who is really into cost cutting, and they say, okay, well, lean will help me do cost cutting. They're not embracing the mindset and the culture, or what I've heard others from Toyota describe as a philosophy, right?
Right.
This gets organizations in trouble then.
Yes, it does. And because a key to Toyota's success is the team members knowing that they're going to have a job tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's why it works, right? That's why team members are willing to work a little bit harder, because they know that at the end of the day, they're going to have a job tomorrow. And, and are we going to use variable workforce, to help adjust when the economy changes? Of course we are. It would be a bad business move not to do that. But at least those team members, those variable workforce members, recognizes the fact that, hey, if they go in knowing that's the situation, right? And there's only been one time, to the best of my knowledge, that TMMK had to let some variable workforce go, and that was in during the recession in 2009. And but Toyota actually worked with the temporary agencies to find all those team members jobs in the meantime, and then they did not lose their spot whenever it came for Toyota to hire again.
Right.
So so that mindset was still there, that the company is looking out for you. And I personally have made it a commitment that I won't consult with a company that just wants to cut jobs.
Right.
They have to be willing to let attrition take its course.
Right.
And work through that. And and at the end of the day, will they have less team members? Probably. And because you've got to make them more effective, but laying off people, I personally don't want my company being associated with that. Yeah. And that's just a values thing for me. So, I'll go in and help, but then attrition has to take its course, and they just recognize that we're going to work through that.
Yeah. Because like you said, attrition, natural turnover is going to occur, voluntary turnover. And then there's also sometimes the opportunities for growth and growing in a more scalable way, growing and doing more work with, call it the same number of staff members. The phrase doing more with less scares people, because again, that sounds like cost cutting and we're going to just pressure you. But the key to the Toyota approach is equipping people to be successful, designing the work in a way that's safe and doesn't overburden people, right?
Exactly. Yeah. It's a matter of, I recently worked with a Toyota dealership to go in and help their process be more lean when they do oil changes. And so they were able to be more efficient in the oil changes that they did, and they could do more faster, all because we built a simple dolly that they could wheel with them that had all their tools on it. So, we cut 10 or 15 minutes off of their tack time, all because they weren't walking back and forth, which was extra energy for them. Right. We tend to walk ourselves, a lot more than we have to. And, if you can build a simple dolly that you can wheel with you that has everything on it you need, and, then that team member ultimately is going to go home at night not feeling as tired, but they've been more efficient and more profitable for the company.
Yeah.
And that's to me, that's a great example that could work with any organization. Is what are those tools that can help that team member be more successful and still go home at night feeling, the same or less tired than what they were originally.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and you talk about dealers, and there's one that I go to. It's not a Toyota or a Lexus dealer. And with their service department, they offer, free car wash at the end of your service, or I think you can even just show up randomly. And if you bought the car there, you can get a free car wash every time. But there's often a sign posted that says something like, the current waiting time for a car wash is 1 hour. I'm like, well, that's not a free car wash.
Right. No, because you're giving up an hour of your time.
And I want to know, and it's not like they're doing a hand wash in detail. I'm sure it's an automated car wash that probably takes all of 3 minutes to run through. So then it starts making me think well, why is the flow or the process so bad that it ends up taking an hour? And I'll tell you, the last time I was there getting some sort of, there was some sort of warranty repair or recall. I forget what it was. And the service advisor said, okay, well, the car is ready, but it's going to take a while to go through the car wash. And I said, basically, you know what? I'd like to say no thanks to the car wash. That does not add value to me right now. I would like to get the car and leave. And I tried to do that as politely as possible. And they're like, okay, we'll get the car brought around.
Yeah. But that is a great example that they're trying to add value, but they're not doing it in necessarily the right way. There would be so much of a big way to improve that whole process. And
I bet there is. And I've learned, I try to practice what I preach of not blaming the people. They're doing the best they can, but there's something about the design of that work that probably begs for some improvement.
Yes, absolutely.
And then, not to get too sidetracked, but I may get slightly distracted in a couple of minutes. I had a vehicle in for service, and someone listening is going to say, well, maybe you should buy a Toyota or a Lexus, and you're not always going to have a car at the dealer. But they are adding value of where, I dropped the car off. It took 2 days, and they gave me a shuttle ride home. I have another vehicle at home. I didn't need a loaner. It's fine. Well, then for the first time, they reached out and said, well, we could actually deliver the vehicle to your home. I thought, oh, that's great. That'll save me some time. That sounds convenient. Could you please bring it between 9 and 11? So, we're recording this podcast and, about 8:30 in the morning. My phone starts ringing, which then my Mac decides to do goofy things about the iPhone call coming in. And I think it messed up or interrupted the sound for a couple of seconds. And then I could look and read, they left a voicemail. Okay, we're on the way over. And I'm like, well, they're probably going to show up before 9, which I hate to complain about it being early. But this isn't the Japanese bullet train where they apologize for being a few seconds early instead of being right on time.
Right.
So I will apologize. I may have to call timeout and take care of that before we wrap up the podcast. So while we were on the topic of dealers, that was ironically a little cause of interruption and distraction a few minutes ago. Okay, so that's the point where the dealership was returning my vehicle. I had to call timeout and interrupt the podcast, but I've edited that out, and we'll be back with more from Tim Turner in just a second. So Tim, let's talk more about the consulting work that you're doing. And one thing that really resonated with me was, you talking about not consulting with companies that want to cut jobs. I've been fortunate 2 different times now when I've worked for other consulting firms, because I share that value personally, but I've been fortunate to work with others who have that same criteria or threshold of even building it into contracts with a client to say, if there is job loss due to this work, then okay, we're that voids the contract. We're backing out. To set that expectation, not just contractually, but making sure we're all on the same page with the client. But what are some of the other components now of what you've learned or what you're doing, moving from Toyota to a different non-Toyota company to now working as a consultant?
Okay. Yeah. So for me, one huge aspect, and I've shared it, is, the servant leadership aspect of the Toyota way. So how do you train that kind of mindset into companies? So, one of my bucket list things was I'm an avid John Maxwell reader. I love John Maxwell leadership content. So I actually became a John Maxwell certified speaker trainer coach. So I can go in and teach those servant leadership principles to companies, to help them understand that mindset of, the only way a lean system, a Toyota system works is whenever you do practice servant leadership. And a key to servant leadership is that you don't provide everybody their wants, you meet their needs. And, not everybody's going to like the fact that you're only going to meet their needs, but they're going to respect the fact that you're going to do that. And, and that's going to build that mutual trust, which is so key in Toyota facilities, is that mutual trust aspect and that mutual respect aspect. And, so for me, that's a huge part of what I try to do. And then what we like to do is I have 25 retired Toyota team members and team leaders, up to assistant manager, that works with me. And we actually will go in, and what I love to do is go in and do a Kaizen Blitz project with the company. So we would go in and say, okay, they have this problem. We want to solve this problem. My team goes in and I match one person from my team with a person on their team, and they mentor them through the whole problem solving process to solve a problem. So in most cases, in 90% of the time, they're getting a return on investment in 1 year of hiring us, because we're solving a major problem for them and teaching their team how to solve the next one on their own. And
go ahead.
And that's important for me is I'm not a success if you keep on needing me, which might not be good for a business, right? Oh. For a consulting company, but at the end of the day, my success as a consultant and as a mentor and as a teacher and coach is that it may take 5 years, but at some point you're not going to need me anymore. And, and that's my goal with every customer that we have, whether it's working for an automotive dealership or whether we're working for a factory. And I really love to set up factories and help a company launch a brand new facility. And that is so much fun, because the team members, are so excited because they're getting a new job, and we get to teach them right from the beginning how it should be done. And that is just so rewarding.
Well, and back to the other, so we're talking about values and being consultants. Not driving layoffs through lean is a value, and it's arguably a smart idea. Like you said, going back to mutual trust, it's necessary to have that trust. And then the second thing is, I think good consultants are willing to work themselves out of a job instead of breeding dependence, because when people, what I've read about experts in consulting and selling services is that the most effective way to gain new clients is to have existing or past clients that are so happy with you that they go out of their way to recommend you. And so, I would try to give you a pat on the back that what you're talking about is good business. It's a longer term strategy, which I'm guessing resonates with you, going back to the idea of Toyota and long term thinking, right?
Yes. Yep. And it's I'm in this. I worked at Toyota 22 years, but right now I'm only 45 years old. So, so I'm still fairly young, and and so I'm in this for the long haul. And, for me, I'm also, not to get sidetracked, but I'm an associate pastor at my church. So for me, this is my way of adding value to the world. Right. And what's my legacy going to be? And anytime I can help a company save jobs, right, from becoming more efficient, or anytime I can help a company launch a new factory, maybe in an area that has some poverty issues. I'm really passionate about that kind of stuff. And I'm actually a member of an organization in Eastern Kentucky in the Appalachian region. It's called SOAR, and they're an economic development group. So I work with companies that are looking to expand their operations, maybe start a new factory. And there's these little factories all over Eastern Kentucky right now that are empty, and bringing jobs back to Eastern Kentucky and helping them find out what kind of tax incentives they can get. And then ultimately it's to hire out of work coal miners.
Yeah. Because
Eastern Kentucky, has been so ravaged by, from the decline in the coal industry. So there's an ample workforce there of hardworking people ready to dive into something new.
Well, that's great. And that opportunity to give back is something I've heard from a lot of Toyota retirees who I've talked to, that Toyota, explicitly encourages people to give back and to teach TPS, or to help people with lean, or whatever word is being used, as a way of helping build other organizations and building communities, providing prosperity, right?
Yes. Yeah. And, and that's a great thing about Toyota is they don't hesitate to let another automotive company come in and see, and that sounds crazy, but it goes back to, the original loom, and everyone's probably heard the story of, the original loom, that somebody had stole the plans, right. And the designs, and Toyota-san at the time said, that's okay, because in a month we're going to have a better loom.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, how do you keep driving that needle forward? And I think, with Toyota letting other companies come in, that always keeps us being innovative and looking at how can we get even better and even better. And the Lexus plant, for example, it's the most lean plant environmentally, I believe, in the world. And there's only 2 actual air tools in the entire plant. Everything is electric or it's gravity fed. So they use a lot of Curry gravity fed automation in that plant. So there's very little. It's very environmentally friendly, I guess is the way to say it.
Sure.
Yeah.
You talk about that willingness to let others learn. There's a Fortune magazine article, I think it goes back to 1990, that talks about that dynamic, and it quotes, I'm going off memory here, it quotes a Toyota executive who says something like, well, our competitors come in and they see what they're doing, but they won't understand the soul of Toyota. And I remember that phrase vividly, the soul of Toyota. And that's a different way. I don't know if it came through translation or not. But this idea of culture and mindsets, and that's harder to see and that's harder to copy, right?
Correct. Yes. And that's where that servant leadership, comes into play. So many companies, they try to implement lean, but they don't implement those soft skills side of, quality circle implementation and developing your people to solve problems. And they don't incorporate that side. And that's why they fail with their lean initiatives. So if you can build in that trust with the team members, paying for them to get a patent, right? Things like that. A lot of companies wouldn't even consider that as something that a team member would appreciate, but it goes a long way at Toyota. Those kind of things, the quality circle competitions, and the only goal at Toyota that I didn't reach is winning a platinum level quality circle, and it's 2 of those. That they choose 2 quality circles a year, and they win, and then they get a trip to Japan to present their. So I won gold multiple times, but I never achieved that platinum level quality circle.
Yeah, and real quickly for people whom I'm familiar with quality circles, and some listeners might not be. this is a practice that goes back to the total quality management days. And I've blogged about this. When I've been back to Japan, the companies there that would say they are doing lean or TPS or Kaizen almost always are built on like this 20-year, 25 or 30-year foundation of total quality management, which among other things involves having everybody involved in a quality circle project. But those projects at other companies, I'm curious how it was at Toyota, Tim. That these might be 6-month-long projects where teams meet and they work on something over time. And some of these companies in Japan, right. So it's not that they're going to stop doing quality circles, but they've realized not everything needs to be a quality circle. They can also do small Kaizens like you were describing. They can use value stream mapping to look at their process a different way. They're using lean. You could call these tools, but it builds upon that mindset of let's involve everybody in quality. So can you what else would you share about the use of quality circles at Toyota and how that fits?
Yeah. So quality circles, for me, the most effective quality circles were the cross-functional ones where we would have, 4 or 5 people from a group, and then we would pull in a maintenance person or an engineer, and we would make a cross-functional team process. And which is when I worked for my previous company, using that process was where my success came from there. Because I would work with our customer, our supplier, and our team to solve, these overarching problems. And that whole mindset of who do you pull in? I've coined a phrase. I'm probably going to write a book on it. It's called red collar leaders. And, we all talk about white collar and blue collar workers, but every group, every team has that red collar leader, whether it's positive or negative, that drives the culture of that whole team. And if you can figure out how to get the buy-in of that person, then you're going to sell your culture ideas easier to your organization. Right. So when I go into an organization, I'm not asking for the 5 most positive people in the factory. I want the 5 loudest people in the factory. Who is driving the culture of their whole team or their whole group? And if we can win them over on the Toyota way, they're going to sell it to their friends. And and so that always surprises some of our clients when I say I don't want your 5 most positive people because they're going to buy into it, right? I want your 5 loudest, or I want your 10 loudest, the ones that are not for it right now. Those are the people I want. And because once you can change those red collar leaders, those red collar workers, the rest of it just falls into place.
And what I've seen in a lot of organizations, those people who are loudest, who are driven to improve, and they question things and they have ideas, unfortunately, they can get labeled as troublemakers. But given the right kind of leadership, they can really thrive, right?
Yeah, because if they didn't have those emotions, they wouldn't care.
Yeah.
So they obviously care. And so how do you take that emotion of that caring, whether it's in a positive mindset or a negative mindset, and how do you turn that into being effective, adding value to the company? Because if they wasn't complaining, they wouldn't care. And so yes, that's huge. With those people, and that doesn't mean it's easy. That's typically going to be the hardest people to win over. But once they buy into the concept, they're going to sell it to everybody.
Yeah, and I'm chuckling. I'm just going to tell a personal story real quick, because when this is going back 20 years ago, when I was an engineer working, I'll just call it a manufacturing company, because that's what it was. Somebody who was a level up for me was talking to a kind of mutual friend who was a peer of mine. And she said something like, Mark seems happier around here recently. And my friend said, I think he's just stopped caring so much. And that's sad. And I was on my way. I think I was on my way out of the company. I ended up leaving. and going someplace else. But my friend understood it. It's like, yeah, the passion that I had, and it just wasn't a good fit for me in that organization because it just wasn't a fit. But it's sad then when people get worn down. I saw this at General Motors. I'm going to reminisce further back, where there were a lot of great, team members, as Toyota would call them, who had just been just beaten down over like 35 years to where they didn't care anymore, or it seemed like they didn't care. And, I think that's in a way, it's kind of a defense mechanism, because that was not a culture of quality and engagement. And it started turning around when we had a Toyota trained plant manager come in, but it's sad. So when I think about the potential for TPS and lean, it's about creating jobs, but it's also about creating better jobs that, as you said earlier, don't leave people exhausted or even psychologically harmed at the end of the day.
Right. And we were speaking about about the problem solving and those complainers, right? And Toyota teaches us to look for problems. But then I think that some companies, they get tired of hearing everybody complain about the problems, right? So, but our job, the core of Toyota, is having every team member look for something that they can help make better. And, and sometimes companies don't understand that. And they're like, well, all we've done is created all these complainers, right? And, but you have to develop them along the way to also be problem solvers and be a part of the solution and not just part of the problem. And I think that's key to a successful lean transformation or transition.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we start to wrap up here, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your firm, and feel free to give a plug and where, how people can learn more. But one thing that's interesting to me is that your firm is all Toyota retirees. And I was wondering if you could talk about that dynamic and what it's like to bring other Toyota colleagues into another organization.
Absolutely. Yep. So my team, they're all like-minded. I say they have to have the right heart and, to be in it for the right reasons, because we're not looking to get rich. We're just, a lot of these folks are they're retired. I kind of let them set their hours. And what I've done is I've given them each a region in the state of Kentucky. They have a 4 or 5 county region that they're responsible for. And we go in and they go and we create the training materials and we'll go in for company and for, like for example, a $5,000 contract, you get 5 days of training or 5 days of mentoring throughout the year. So you can choose whether you want to do all that in one 5-day week or whether you want to stretch that out and have us come in 1 day a month or 1 day every other month or however you want to work that out. And so that gives my team members, and a lot of our team members on my team retired and moved back home. So they would move from Western Kentucky and move to Georgetown and work their career. And then when they retired, they wanted to move back to Western Kentucky. And so that allows us to spread out, and that keeps me from having to run all over the state by myself, because I develop my people. I develop the training materials. I develop my people to train. They watch me train, for a few sessions. And then once they feel comfortable to try it, I watch them. And then I turn them loose and let them go at it themselves. And so we have that. We're partnering with a school system in Kentucky to help set up a technical school. And so I'm really excited about that. They have an empty middle school building that we're going to convert to where those students can get dual credits, and we're creating courses that's aimed at what does that local industry need. So there's a big power plant in that county, and that's the biggest employer. So what does that power plant need for future workers? And then we're going to teach that skills at the high school level and have them ready to go into technical school or college. And, and then that factory gets good solid workers that are prepared.
That's awesome.
So we do that. I love to help companies be innovative. Like if a company wants to give back to the community, setting up a special team, for example, that maybe they hire, they partner with a local homeless shelter, and they create this sub-assembly area in their plant, and in the company, they want to help, but they also have to be financially, they have to be smart. So, but to give people in their community a second chance, we come in and we do values training, and we set up these processes, and then they can even be Triangle Consulting Group employees for a year. And I have one team I'm doing this with now. They're people with developmental disabilities, and so they're Triangle Consulting employees. And then once they've proven themselves after a year, the company can then hire them, or send them to their temporary agency, and then they go through the process to where they become full-time employees. But that corporation or that company doesn't have to take on that responsibility of hiring those people directly. Because everybody deserves a second chance, and a lot of people change their whole life. And so one of my big goals is to partner with different companies, and I hire people that are homeless, and a portion of their money that they make goes into a special account. And then once they have enough money for a deposit and first month's rent, then they get that money as a bonus, and then they get a raise to their full salary. And that way we've helped pull them out of the ditch that they're in and develop them. And then we've also helped the company have a good, solid employee, that recognizes what it is to struggle. And so I try to get innovative and help companies do things like that. And my company's called Triangle Consulting Group, and it breaks down, each point is leadership, business, and community. And so how can the business apply the leadership to help to be a community partner and be a successful business? And that's really what my goal as a company is helping other businesses be more efficient, be more successful, but then also benefiting their local community and impacting in a positive way. So that's really, what's most important to me. My team is 25 people. That we all have different, different work experiences. I don't have 25 people that only worked in assembly. I have 25 people, and some worked in body weld, some were former maintenance, some worked in paint shop, some were, worked in human resources. So I've got these 25 people, and we can literally go in and help a company with any problem. And it's not just manufacturing. It can be, I'm talking with a healthcare consultant in West Virginia right now, and looking for ways to partner with other consultants, because I don't pretend to have all the answers, because I don't. Even though I left Toyota and went into a management level position, I recognize the fact that I don't have all the answers. So I try to partner with people that can make up my gap. Right. And so what's great about us is say, Mark, if you went into a big hospital and you were launching this big hospital and you just needed manpower, right, and some innovative thinkers, you could hire my consulting company to go in and partner with you and for us to do a big blitz activity. And so it's not that I really like to partner with other consultants to help them reach all their goals as well.
And how can people contact you if they would want you or someone else from the Triangle Consulting Group team to come in and coach with them, or coach them or work with them in some way?
Yeah. So my email is tim.turner@trianglecg.com, and our website is trianglecg.com.
Great.
Yeah. And I tell people I'll go anywhere in the world. I've been to China twice, Mexico 3 times. So I'll go anywhere in the world. So I'm not, hesitant on jumping on a plane and meeting anybody where they're at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, it's been really, really nice being able to talk to you again. 9 years after the first podcast. Again, I would invite people to go check out the book. You can find it on Amazon as paperback and Kindle versions. One Team on All Levels. The second edition that's available now, and it's listed as by Tim Turner and Friends. You had a lot of collaborators on this book.
Yeah. I had 80 team members that wrote for it. And that's really kind of the premise for my business, started with that book, is how can we bring other people together to help, make the world a better place. Yep.
Well, great. So that's a great note to go ahead and leave things on. Let's hopefully, I'm sure this conversation, what you've shared here, I hope it'll inspire others to use TPS and other lessons from Toyota, whether we call it lean or whatever label we give it. Let's go create better patient care, better organizations, a better world. That's aiming high, huh?
Yes, it is.
It's an important challenge, right?
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
Well, again, our guest today has been Tim Turner. Tim, thank you so much for taking time. Again, I apologize for the car dealer interruption. I did get my vehicle back, and I do appreciate them for that. But
yeah, tell them to give me a call, Mark.
Go fix their car wash, amongst other things, maybe. Or I'm sorry, you'll help them.
Absolutely.
You'll help them figure out how to fix their car wash, right?
Absolutely, yes.
A better way to say it. So, all right, thanks a lot, Tim.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. This has been the Lean Blog Podcast. For lean news and commentary updated daily, visit www.leanblog.org. If you have any questions or comments about this podcast, email Mark at leanpodcast@gmail.com.